All right. Welcome everybody. It's Monday, April the 2nd. This is Public Lab's April Open Hour, and our subject is marine plastics, big and small. For notes, in case anyone would like to follow along, I will share in the chat a link to the pad where everyone can write in. You'll all have a different color. Feel free to add any running questions or general notes there. So in this open hour, in this open hour, we're going to be talking about plastics in the ocean, big and small, macro and micro, the overall problem, the sources and accumulation zones, ways of monitoring, and efforts to address this global marine issue. This is a relatively informal type of event, but we have invited Sky and Barrett each to give an overview of their work, a short overview, and take some questions and answers about what they perceive to be the most serious issues with this kind of pollution, and offer some ideas for ways that community scientists might get involved. I can begin the introductions, and then I'll call on you based on the name I see that you've typed into Zoom. My name is Liz Barry, and I'm on staff at the nonprofit and calling in from New Orleans. And next I see Brian Dowling.
Hello?
Brian. Yes, I can.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. Hi, I'm Brian Dowling. I have a blog and a wiki called New Community Paradigms, and currently I'm taking a systems practice course and working with some people from a university in the Netherlands who want to take a look at plastic pollution in Thailand. They're going to go over in the summertime and try to set up some programs with entrepreneurs there to see if they can come up with some systems to help the situation.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you, Brian. Great to hear from you. Next I see Brandon Gillette.
Good afternoon. This is Brandon Gillette. I'm actually a middle school science teacher in Kansas City, Missouri, and I have a couple of students that are actually interested in learning more about plastics in the ocean. So I have a student here with me who's going to listen in as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next I see Natalie Montoya. Natalie, you're welcome to share a short introduction if you'd like. All right, next I see Rosie.
Hi everyone, I'm Rosie. I'm just a curious person, volunteer at Greenpeace, and part of the Action Tech group, and they shared this event, so I'm here.
Great, thanks for joining. I've heard of that Action Tech group. Next I see Deanna Lyons.
Hi, I'm a member of the Louisiana Master Naturalist group, and I just kind of wanted to listen in and see what you have to say.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming in. Next I see Lizzie Winchester.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm from Florida. I recently was the state coordinator for the monofilament recycling program, and now I'm involved with Planet Love Life. It's an organization that takes fishing gear and turns it into bracelets and necklaces, and is talking about marine debris and derelict fishing gear.
Fantastic. Thanks for calling in. Next I see Margie.
Hey, it's working. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm in Louisiana, of course. I work for the Sierra Club. I've been around for a long time. I made comments on the Marpole Treaty when it was started up back in the 80s. And it was the first plastics law, basically, to stop them from dumping in the oceans, the ships. And then I helped write some programs to stop oil companies from dumping their plastics overboard. So I've been worried about plastics for a long time.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next, I see Dan.
Hello, I'm Dan from Picayune, Mississippi. Don't know anything about it. I'm trying to learn.
Hi, Dan. Next, I see Amir.
Hi. So my name is Amir Bernat. I'm from Israel, and in my day job, I work as image algorithms engineer at a company which is called Mobile ODT. And once or twice a week, I try to join to the public lab open calls and try to see if I can help or give some inputs or insights. And I'm very curious about this.
Thank you so much. Next, I see FIU Environmental Art Group.
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, so we are an environmental art class at the in the Department of Art and Art History at Florida International University in Miami.
Wow.
And we're doing, well, a lot of people had some projects about plastics in the ocean, so we're glad to be here.
Wow, thanks. Great to see a whole class full. Next, I see Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff. I'm in Providence, Rhode Island. I've been kind of in touch with a few different people interested in working on ocean plastics and trying to kind of connect the dots between them and get people who are interested in like image analysis, connecting with people collecting samples, connecting with people doing advocacy. So, but I'm just in the middle, or I'm the glue.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Next, I see Gretchen.
Hi, my name is Gretchen Gerke. I'm calling in from Durham, North Carolina. I've also been interested in plastics for a long time, and I'm excited to listen in, and I'm also on the staff of Public Lab.
Great, thank you, Gretchen. I see Bronwyn and then Stevie.
Hi, I'm Bronwyn. I'm the Open Hardware Community Manager here at Public Lab, and I also I spend a lot of time in a landfill in a bay in New York, so it's a topic that is near and dear to me.
I love you.
Hi, sorry, were you waiting? Stevie here in the New Orleans office, and yeah, I'm really excited to see so many people here and to learn a bit about these projects as well.
Okay, great. And now we come to, well, actually, there's one phone number. I'm wondering if somebody who's calling in with the 215 phone number might like to introduce themselves.
It's me. It's Leslie.
Oh, hi, Leslie. So incognito.
Hey, so I'm on a bus, but I'll be home soon. So I'll just say I'm from Philly, and I'm a volunteer for public interested in the topic.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So now we come to our presenters, and I would like to request Sky and then Barrett do this kind of very short introductions to themselves, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sky for her presentation and take some Q&A, and then to Barrett. But right now, Sky, if you could just do a short one, and then Barrett, you as well.
Sure. My name is Sky Moret. I'm a strategist and data visualizer at Periscopic in Portland, Oregon, and have been a research kind of assistant scientist at Sea Education Association in Woods Hole for the last 8 years.
Great, thanks.
My name is Barrett Roth. I'm a sustainable designer, educator, and activist. I teach sustainable design at the New School and have a project called testingourwaters.net that I'll share more about. That's part of a new sustainable design nonprofit we're starting called Anthropocene Design.
Well, I want to go.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. And also, like, a warm welcome to all the new faces. It would be great to stay in touch. If if you're not otherwise connected to Public Lab and you're wondering where to start, either you can use the chat right here in this Zoom to share contact information, or feel free to DM in the chat. You can adjust the little blue drop down to say send chat to Public Lab, and that'll just go to the nonprofit staff. If you want to give us some contact information, we can follow up and help get you onboarded. Okay, great. So Sky, will you share your presentation with us?
Help me figure out, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Is there an easy way to start share?
There is. If you look down at the bottom of the Zoom window.
Share screen.
Yeah.
Yep. Great. All right. Let's share my desktop. Okay. So hopefully you guys can see a map. Is it coming through for you guys? Let's minimize this.
Yes.
No, it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, so I just pulled a few slides that I have used in presentations elsewhere just to give a kind of big picture of what the issue of marine plastic looks like in the open ocean. So I've spent 80,000 miles at sea, from Antarctica to the Marquesas, primarily in the kind of Eastern Pacific and the North Atlantic, teaching students oceanography at sea. And part of what I did starting in 2005 was looking at, we do these twice daily newsstand tows, which newsstand is the surface layer. And so we're really just getting the top 25 centimeters of the sea surface, looking at what plastic, how much plastic is there, what kind is it, primarily for student projects. But I realized over Sea Semester, the Sea Education Association has been around for since the 70s, and I realized that we had been doing this continuously, for decades. And so when I started hearing about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in 2007, from personal experience, I thought, well, I haven't seen these kind of giant patches that they're talking about. I want to dive into this further. And so subsequently, I've been working on published papers over the last decade on just kind of massive inventories of how much plastic is there, what kind is it. Is it changing over time? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Kind of just a very big picture of open ocean plastic. So I wanted to start with this. This is the end of a very quick movie done by Nikolai Maximenko and Jan Hafner from University of Hawaii. And this just shows a modeled event, or of if you were to seed the entire ocean with kind of every 1 degree, 1 by 1 degree of the ocean surface with a piece of plastic. So imagine this everything you see that's white, it started out as light purple. Where would that plastic go? And you kind of see this movie play after 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. And what you quickly realize is that because of Coriolis, because of something called Ekman transport, and kind of mainly surface and wind currents, we get, if you were to just introduce plastic at one moment in time all over the ocean and see where it goes, you'll see that it quickly moves away from coastlines and the equator, and really starts forming at these areas around 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south in very high pressure zones. That's where we have the world deserts. There's not a lot of wind, and you get these slowly converging surface currents where really, it's kind of like a giant whirlpool as a metaphor, but the kind of water has nowhere to go but down in the middle of these areas, and the plastic stays floating at the surface. And so you can imagine what lies in Bermuda and some of the islands that are in these areas. Let's see if I can go back for a second. So this is in Whalebone Bay in Bermuda. You can see that I've circled all of the plastic pellets that we found in this area. So this just gives you a sense of on both on the surface of the ocean, but also what washes up in places like Bermuda. You see really two main kinds of plastics. You see this industrial pellets, these things that I've circled that are like they're the shape of little hamburgers. They're like 3 or 4 millimeters in size, and they're just, they're mainly polyethylene and polystyrene. And then you can see all the kind of fragments, and sometimes you get microfilaments, films around these things. So we can really start to categorize what kinds of plastic we see. And kind of to skip to the end, the only promising story that we found in our 25 5+ years of data in the Atlantic and Pacific is really a decrease in these plastic pellets over time. So once people started saying, hey, there's lots of these industrial pellets out here, what's going on? Or people are just dumping these in the Delaware River because there are lots of plastic manufacturing companies along there. The EPA encouraged, it wasn't mandatory, but they encouraged an operation called Operation Clean Sweep, and many industrial companies started cleaning up their waste. And we do, in fact, see a lot of a 90% reduction in plastic pellets since 1986 to 2010. This is the boats. This is one of the 2 boats. They look very similar that I worked on for, I did 20 trips on these boats, 6 weeks each, collecting plastics that look like this in the open ocean. So you'll see these aren't giant, this is collecting all the plastic that we collected in half an hour in the middle of one of those accumulation zones. And you'll see there's a lot of pieces. And this amount that we caught in a net tow for towing it for half an hour, probably, I don't know, I'm guessing maybe is, at least a couple million pieces per square mile, which is a lot, but it's not this landfill looking, kind of island that we all picture in our heads when we think of garbage patch. On the right there, you can see that we caught a couple of triggerfish in one of the nets, and I kind of cut it open and squeezed its stomach out into that petri dish, and you can see that some of these fish followed debris and such out to the middle of these areas. So I guess I want to highlight more than anything that what we're dealing with, even in the middle of the ocean, in terms of the number of pieces, the quantity of pieces out there, is there's still a lot. It's not minimizing the problem to say it's very small, but it's very small. It's all smaller than the size of your fingernail. Really, the vast majority, I think the average was like 0.08 grams. So it's, this is our data from the North Atlantic that was published in 2010. And this was over 6,000 surface net tows since 1986. And really just it's hard to see here, but the black stars are where we saw more than 200,000 pieces per square kilometer. So you can really see that they're centered on this 30 degrees north line. And yeah, there's a lot of plastic, but there's much more in the Pacific for a lot of reasons, which I can go into if people are interested. But you can see that we've kind of put a box here around what we have determined is the center of the gyre, the Northeast Pacific gyre. And you can see here we're seeing areas where concentrations exceeded 500,000 pieces per square kilometer, so significantly more. And we guesstimated, and it's really an underestimate, that there's about 200,000 metric tons, 21,000 metric tons in this area. And working with that same modeler again, I just have a couple more slides. I just wanted to show you, so we were really interested in how long does plastic actually take to get from various ports in the US, various river outflows to get to the centers of these gyres. So in this red box in the middle here is the North Atlantic gyre. Is the plastic coming from Europe? Is it coming from the Caribbean? Whose fault is it? And we found that working with modelers, it was pretty interesting to say, okay, this is a picture of where do plastic come from that reached this box. And there's a couple from North Africa. There's a couple when we increased the model from Europe, but more or less most of it's coming from the United States and a bit from the Caribbean. And it really only takes 45 days, I think, from Miami, 30 days from New York to get to the middle of the gyre. So it's actually pretty quick. And then this is the picture of what it looks like when we ask, where does that plastic go once it's reached the box? And it really doesn't really travel very far. You can say it stays pretty contained within the Western North Atlantic area. Some of it might wash up on the Bahamas, but really the fate of plastic really, it breaks down pretty quickly and into smaller and smaller pieces, I should say. That's not to minimize the issue. But we actually have found that the plastic in both the North Atlantic, and we found that 10 years, this is 10 years of data right here in the Pacific, has not significantly increased over time. It's quite variable. It's pretty hard to just do a transect and study these things in a way that is kind of true to science and robust. That you guys may have seen a paper came out a couple weeks ago talking about how it's 18 times bigger than we thought. This Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and And they did, you know, a couple days of, it was good science, but they did a couple days of aerial surveys looking at big pieces, looking at the kind of these large things that you can see from a plane. So it's fair to say that, you know, there is a lot of derelict fishing gear that can add to the mass of what we thought already, but in terms of number of pieces, we have not seen a consistent increase over time. And this is just to give you a quick glimpse of kind of plastic bag out there. We have worked with microbiologists looking at kind of the insane kind of micro ecosystems that live on these. You can see in the bottom left there, there's all kinds of, I'm not a microbiologist, but there's all kinds of bizarre, just how a black plastic trash bag can turn into many different layers of organisms living on organisms. And these researchers found that a good percentage of these bacteria are in the genus Vibrio, which is related to waterborne pathogens and such. So we could be transporting, you know, surprising organisms around the world without knowing it based on our debris. And so finally, just for my own benefit, because I, you know, as scientists, a lot of our work exists in these very proprietary, you know, paywalled papers that you can't access and see all in one place. So just quickly in Tableau a couple years ago, I made this map at the time, putting 10,000 net toes together to look at where plastic is. And this is on my website. You're welcome to check it out, download it. But this is just combining papers that I had been on with another paper by Marcus Erickson and others, kind of in the, that went along the south, you know, more southern gyres in the Atlantic and Pacific, and a bit off of, you know, in the Indian Ocean, looking at how much plastic we've seen over time. And this, again, this is in plastic pieces per square kilometer. And if you're interested in this cruise on the far right, the kind of zigzag pattern that has this giant circle, that's the place where we saw 23 million pieces per square mile. There's a documentary about that that's about 45 minutes called Into the Gyre, which you can find online. And just to let you know, this is, you know, just prior to 2010, but, you know, plastic waste generation in the US, this is in thousands of million tons, I should say, of US municipal solid waste. We're not recycling a ton here. We're still discarding a lot of plastic, and we're discarding 3 times more of the buoyant plastics, the polyethylene, polystyrene, and polypropylene, than some of these other ones. So blue and green here, black high density polyethylene and polypropylene are the, just the polyethylenes and polypropylenes are the buoyant plastics, and the kind of water bottle plastics, the PVC and polystyrene without the foam. So styrofoam without the air bubbles in it are the dense ones. I think that's it. And all of that Atlantic and Pacific data, if you guys want to screenshot this, this is all of our data is publicly available. And so you can download it and check it out. They make it kind of hard to find, but it's right here. That's it for me.
Great, Sky, thank you so much. This was an incredible presentation. And also, really, wow, what a long time you have spent on boats.
That's amazing.
Yeah, this is amazing. We would like to have a couple, if there's any direct, like, could you restate that kind of like direct questions right now, as we have Baron's presentation to go through, and then we will absolutely have time to move into a proper discussion for the last 15 and 20 minutes.
Sure.
Any clarifying questions for Sky at this time, or expressions of thanks?
Definitely, thanks. That was very informative, really good. Some of the best information I've seen on the gyres and everything. Really nice.
Thank you.
Quick question for Sky.
And we'll have access to all of that at your website?
Yep, you can, if you go to my website, it's just skymoray.com. If you click on the top, you'll see a lot of designy stuff, but if you click on science in the top, in the middle, you'll find I can put it in the chat, but you'll find that there. Like all the different papers and links to them.
I want, Sky, since you're up in Oregon, have you ever worked with Julie Nielsen? She started the beach sweeps in Oregon. She's the one that inspired me to do the first beach sweeps here in Louisiana back in the early 80s or mid 80s. And she did necropsies of seabirds and found out, so it got her inspired, found out that a bunch of the babies had died because they were stuffed with plastics, and including plastic remains of cigarette filters. And some of the babies had actually been poisoned by the nicotine and everything, and the other ones were just stuffed so full of plastic they starved. And she did that back in the mid-'80s. I mean, she was really a pioneer. And she's up there by you.
Awesome. I'll check her out. I'll find her. Thank you, Margie.
Thanks.
Great. So Sky, are you also able to see the pad where we are taking some notes, perhaps now that you're not?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Down on what is currently line 40, although that could change, I copied in a couple questions that were pasted into a chat. If you could handle those in the pad, we will do a couple intros.
I don't see them numbered.
Ah, okay. They're also in the chat from, oh, you know what? The lines are on the far left, the line numbers. On this OpenHour pad. It's not the website that says OpenHour. It's, I just put it again in the chat. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. Here we go. It's opening.
Okay, great. And then we have a couple new people who joined us. I see Programmer 1200. If you'd like to do a short introduction. And then next, if Don Walker is still on. Yes, I see you. If you would like to as well.
Hi, it's me, Zachary Marlowe, Programmer 1200, I guess. I just thought I'd listen in. I had no idea. I mean, I don't live nowhere near the ocean, so I don't have a lot of information to help out on that. But I'm just going to listen in and see if I can learn.
Great, thanks.
Hi, I'm Dawn. I'm a PhD student at the University of Toronto and have wound up kind of working with some public lab people on another project called Edgy. I'm just really interested in this. I don't have a background, but was really excited to see about it, and I'm glad to be able to watch on.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for joining.
All right. I'm not that link isn't opening, so I'm sorry about that.
I'm sorry about that as well. I would like to, the questions for you to consider, and then we can take them later, which is, does your research also indicate that the GPGP, Great Pacific Garbage Patch, is rapidly accumulating more plastic as suggested by the ocean cleanup? And then the other question in from Barrent, who's going to talk now, is what kind of trawl were you using? And so let's take those.
Yeah, sure. At the end.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, Barrent, please share with us.
All right. I'll share my screen here. Let me know if it's working. Share screen. You guys see that? I hope.
Yes, looks great.
Okay. So thanks, Liz, for having us. I'm going to talk briefly about the project that we started called testingourwaters.net. It's a new project. We're still evolving it, and we want to take it much further than where it is. But we thought, let's start telling people about it and getting them involved. And it relates a lot with what Sky had shared earlier. And this is from presentations that we've given before, and it echoes a lot of what Sky is saying, and that it was great that a lot of people became aware of this issue, but thinking of it as a garbage patch is a little misleading. So we're trying to move a little bit away from that term. It's not really an island either. People get confused. They try and see it on Google Maps. So it's not something they can see Even soup, although closer, is still not quite right. And speaking with the Five Gyres folks, what they suggested we started referring to as a plastic smog. And I think this really dovetails with what Sky was talking about earlier, about how the pieces are just getting broken down into smaller and smaller little fragments. And about 2 or 3 years ago, they came out with the first global estimate at 270,000 metric tons from 5.25 trillion pieces, which is really hard to kind of wrap your head around. Here's the trawl that they have been using. It's called the Manta trawl. This is not the trawl in action. This is just kind of dropped over the side of the boat and preparing to go, but you can still see what it's doing. It's essentially just skimming the ocean and collecting the plastic that floats. So we called our project Testing Our Waters, because this is only capturing the plastic that floats. As Sky pointed out earlier, a great deal of the plastic sinks. So by capturing the stuff that floats, we're just getting kind of a litmus test as to how bad the problem actually is. We didn't call it cleaning our waters. We're really just testing our waters. And in fact, we're towing a net through the water. So this is where Five Gyres went. We've been collaborating with them a lot. So a lot of the information I'm pulling from is from their nonprofit organization. They get their name from the 5 biggest clusters of ocean currents, referred to as gyres, in the North and South Pacific, the North and South Atlantic, and then the Indian Ocean. And you can see everywhere they went, they found plastic. Here, when the founders, Marcus and Anna, were in New York for a number of months, a couple years ago, they trawled outside of Manhattan, where I am today. And this is what they found in the Hudson. And it made me realize, as a designer, that, if people could see this problem, they would be much more willing to act on it. And in conversations with Marcus and Ann about how we could get involved, it led to the project that we have. So I'll go through these quickly. I think Sky touched on this. The dramatic increase in plastic production has led to a big part of this problem. There's some great informational graphics from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who's been doing fantastic work on the circular economy, and this directly relates. I love this graph that they put together that shows that out of all of the plastic packaging that goes out, we're only getting 2% back for closed loop recycling. 8% is downcycled, 4% is lost in the process. So out of the 14, so we're only capturing 14%, and 4% of that is lost. And out of the 10%, only 2% is actually goes back into closed loop recycling. The rest is burned, and that's not good, or landfilled, and that's a problem, or it leaks out and often ends up into the ocean. And that's where we're seeing, this is where most of the plastic that we're seeing in the ocean is coming from. It's estimated that 80% of the plastic in the ocean is coming from land-based sources, more than likely from storm drains and situations like that, sewage overflows. I wanted to put up this slide. I saw this at a conference last year, and I thought it really hit home, something like this. And, like if you walked into your kitchen and saw this image, your first instinct would be to turn off the water, right? And we need to tap that instinct, because right now, if you correlate this to the plastics pollution problem, with the plastics flooding into the ocean, or the sink in the analogy, what we're doing is we're mopping the floor, and we're going to be continually mopping the floor forever unless we turn off the tap. And so it's estimated that the plastic is entering the ocean at the rate of a garbage truck a minute. So unless cleanup operations are happening at the rate of a garbage truck a minute, we're going to be fighting a losing battle. So we need to recognize that we need to try and cut this material from entering our ocean off at its source. And so that's kind of where what we're trying to do. The project came about in collaboration with Five Gyres. We drew up dimensional drawings for their manta trawl so that they could provide these drawings to other scientists and academic institutions, or really citizen scientists, anyone that wanted to build a trawl and start studying the amount of pollution in their ocean could take these drawings and fabricate their own trawl. They were trying to disseminate the information, and that kind of got us thinking about how we could take it further. And so we took this and collaborated with Five Gyres and New York, New Jersey Baykeeper. We received some grants from Tishman and Artist Foundation. We went to the Breaking Down Plastics conference. But what this all led to was building a series of do-it-yourself trawls that anyone could build on their own. And so this particular trawl takes 2-liter water bottles and attaches them to a metal frame and uses the plastic bottles, as part of the solution, so you can start to test it. And so this was kind of our proof of concept, where we sent these drawings to South Carolina Aquarium. They built their own little mini trawl and started testing for plastic pollution in their waters, because it kind of came from the fact that we realized a trawl is a very simple device, and anyone that wants to could fabricate something this simple. You just need to be able to float along the water and have a net. So we're using just a $2 paint filter net to capture plastic that's floating on the water. So the good news is they built it and it worked. The trawl, with just the fabricated parts that they have available, worked well. The bad news is, of course, they found plastic. This is trawling, a similar set of simple tools in the Gowanus Canal here in New York City and Brooklyn specifically, where you can just use a weight and the rim on a 5-gallon paint bucket, and then the filter for that bucket. So all told, these materials, are going to be probably like $10, something like that, by the time you get the hose clamp and everything, string, rocks in a bottle for weight, and then you can just drag it over a bridge and trawl for the floating debris that way. So we tried to come up with several different ways to make inexpensive trawls. This is a converted trawl from IKEA components. This is a shelving unit that can be converted into a trawl. We have Instructables put together so that people can start to build their own, and we encourage other people to contribute to that. That's the workshop. So this is the most recent one. This is what we call the Re-3DP trawl. Gets its name because it's using recycled water bottles and as a building material with a 3D printer to build these green sort of handles. So the one you saw at South Carolina Aquarium was just metal fabricated parts. So if you have access to a welder, easy to build, but it's now actually more accessible to find a 3D printer than it is a welder. So what we've done is developed parts that you can 3D print made from recycled water bottles. So these green components are 3D printed components that when you add up these components and the other hardware and nut ropes and everything, all told, this trawl is $15. So we've taken what Five Gyres is using, the manta trawl, which is a $5,000 piece of equipment, and boiled it down to $15. And in the process of tweaking this and putting together a bill of materials, and we will have the ability for people to download these parts and start trawling themselves. So here's a picture of the filament. The one I showed previously was recycled ginger ale bottles or some type of soda drink. The one you see there in the image is water bottles. They're both the same kind of filament. One's just tinted green. You can see it trawling through the ocean there. And then what we've done is we've started the process of allowing, we're in the beginning stages of setting up the process for people to process the plastic. Once they find it in a net, you can dig through what you've collected in the net, put the pieces out onto a 5mm grid and start to capture how many pieces are bigger than 5mm, how many are smaller. And then eventually what we'll do is have this information available to cross-reference for people to find out how polluted their particular waterways are. So that's kind of like the vision for where we want to take this. Here's some pictures of what we took in the Gowanus Canal. We have instructions on or suggestions on what you can use for how to build your own trawl, templates for how to build your own trawl. We encourage people to submit those, and eventually we'll have an app that will connect, whether we partner with one of these organizations or not. We'll see. And we like that the fact that Fusion is available to anyone as free software, so that all the files that we put up, people will be able to modify and adjust as needed, and that's it. So I hope that made sense.
Yeah, that was super. Thank you so much, Barron. Yeah, beautiful presentation. Sky and Barron, I just really am so grateful that you have joined us today. If we could, not that the presenters cannot again share their screens, but if we could stop sharing screens and kind of come together here, because there's I think there's a desire for a broader conversation, and I want to explain how we can facilitate that. So we're going to be working between the Zoom and this little shared notepad that I keep pasting in the notes. I'll paste it in one more time, pad.publiclab.org/p/OpenHour. And down on line 40, I copied in the questions that came in for Sky during her presentation. I want to invite everyone to go ahead and add some questions to that list, and then we can take them in order. And if you have a general comment that you would just like some airtime, if you could please just add your name to Stack at any point, and I'll be calling on you. So first up, back to the questions. Well, actually, I should say, does anyone have any clarifying questions for Barron, just as I called for clarifying questions for Sky?
Barron, I had a question for you about how do you, I love the aspect of taking pictures and sending them in. How do you account for how much volume of water that they've towed through, so you can get at some idea of density, how many pieces per, cubic meter or liter or whatever?
Yeah, we haven't gotten that far. Right now, it's we're looking for them to start to contribute. The first stage is presence or absence, right? Did they find it or not? And then after that, we're going to start to dig a little deeper. Some of the trawls we can estimate how much volume based on sort of averages of where they're sitting in the ocean. But we'll have to come back to try and answer that question once we get a little bit more refined in how each trawl is sitting in the water. We should be able, if it's just a matter of measuring the surface of the opening, that's easy, but what's hard is to tell how far down in the water each trawl is sitting. And so if we can feel confident that there's some type of general buoyancy, then we can use that as a gauge for how much water is going through. But at this point, we're not far enough along.
Great. And for Sky, a question in from Sean in Ireland with Open Litter Map, who we'll call on later as well. But is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch getting bigger?
So we have found that it's not getting bigger in our 11 years of data that it was published a couple years ago, and we're doing data every year in the Pacific with that boat. But we've found that it's incredibly variable. So of course, when we go to the middle of the area of concentration, it's higher. and so if we don't take into account, if you kind of consider, what is unbiased sampling, if we don't, I think what we're seeing is more and more people are going to the center of the gyre to sample. And so we're saying it's increasing over time, but really what we found over going through the same exact area year year after year for 10 years in a row is that it's all very small, you know, and we're not getting big pieces, and no one has consistently monitored for big pieces. So that's where this disparity is. What the paper that was just published recently found is that, you know, 50% of the pieces are, you know, giant, like kind of derelict fishing gear in terms of the 50%, not 50% of the pieces, 50% of the mass, which I totally believe. But in terms of the small bits of pieces, you know, not related to fishing that perhaps come from the LA River, come from the Columbia River, come from Asia, we have not seen a consistent increase over time. And our data that we're republishing in the Atlantic soon, that 22 years of data in the Atlantic that we're updating, we found the same thing, that it's not increasing in the Atlantic either. That's not to say there's not, it's just breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces. The ocean has amazing ways of, you know, of dealing with plastic. So it's not to say it's not a problem, but we have not seen you know, any kind of a increase, exponential or not, over time.
Great, thank you so much. A question from Barrett, for Sky, which is, what kind of trawl were you using?
Yeah, so primarily we were using Newston net tows, which are similar to the Manta. They tow at the ocean surface. They don't have buoys on either side. We go about 2 knots and kind of let the net out. So it's roughly, it's a half a meter tall and a meter wide. And so we're really just skimming the top 25 centimeters of the surface. The net's about 5 meters long, and it has 333, you know, third of a millimeter mesh. And we tow it at 2 knots for half an hour. So we try to just always do 1 nautical mile every, you know, roughly 1,800 meters every noon and every midnight, wherever we are, if not more than that. And we do put many, as you'll see in that documentary, Into the Gyre, we do put several Tucker trawls in the water. And that's the only way where you can discreetly measure a depth, say like 5 meters down, or how much plastic is 10 meters down. Tucker trawls are really cool. They're mechanical. You don't need a lot of, you know, expensive electronic gizzies. And that allows you to see, you know, the net opens at a depth, and you can send a little weight at a depth. And so we did lots of studies on how much is actually pushed down into the water column. And what we learned from that is there's surprisingly, surface tension is amazing. even kind of slightly denser plastics that perhaps should be mixed down end up staying on the surface. And so on my website, I can send it to you, Barrett, but there's an article about what we learned about how the last 7-8 hours of wind, how much wind in the past 24 hours affects your sample, how much plastic you're getting, and how much does wind cause it to mix down into the water column.
Wow, that's amazing.
Okay, great. And there'll be follow-up steps on documenting trawl design, guaranteed. Next question from the environmental art class in Miami. Is there still development going on with the idea by Boyan Slat, who is the inventor who designed the manta ray concept to allow ocean tides to assist in collecting plastics? The tides pass through band to collect debris.
I haven't seen. I think he's got his heart in the right place, but I think from what started of a place that of this idea that you can clean up the ocean, I think that's problematic, and that's what I was trying to illustrate. Is that I think psychologically we would love to be able to just have some new technology come and clean it all up for us and not have to really change much in the rest of the way that we live our lives. But it seems very problematic and unrealistic, and I haven't seen any group kind of come out and say, yeah, this is something that's feasible, other than their group, in efforts to clean up the ocean in that way. We have to cut the pollution off from entering the ocean because otherwise we're going to be chasing our tail. Or back to the analogy, the water is just going to be keep coming in and overflowing the sink. And so we need to cut the water off at its source, or cut the plastic off at its source. So I love the ingenuity and the effort and the ideas, and but I think it's we need to be looking at how to cut the plastic off at its source rather than trying to clean it up, my opinion.
Okay, great. And perhaps that is the start of an answer for the next question, which is from Leslie in Philly, asking for both presenters, what is the step that would make the most difference? So I just heard from Barrett, cutting it off at the source. Sky, perhaps you could go.
I mean, I personally think that the first step is really just understanding what kind of plastics are you using, not using disposable kind of single-use items. I think a lot of this goes without saying, but if you want to know, like, is this kind of understanding plastic better, educating yourself and your friends, is this, is the bottom of my yogurt lid, what kind of plastic is that? Does it float or not? Where is this going? What happens to it if I don't recycle it? And I think that education aspect, I think the cutting it off at the source is critical. I think it's the number one thing. I think that idea of having more pride and ownership over not using disposable items and not kind of promoting that culture can have to do with participating in cleanups, obviously, but then also having students visualize. I mean, I'm a data visualizer. I love information design, and so working with data, say from Barron or from local groups or your community, and thinking about how can we visualize this? How does that relate to stuff that I do in my house at all age levels? Because we have graphic arts programs, and in school we have coding in school, we have mapping now. There's so many ways to engage instead of just you should recycle more, or don't buy those apples that are already pre-cut in a plastic bag. I think there is a lot of ingenuity that we can push now that we have lots of ways of linking together and connecting with data. Great. And Barrett, would you like to add anything?
Well, yeah, I completely agree with Sky. I think it's to just add that I think plastic is not the problem per se. It's this wonderful material that can take on all these wonderful shapes and lasts forever. Us putting it into a disposable item and designing items that we know that are going to last forever, not forever, but an extremely long time, and using this wonderful material for a disposable purpose, that's the real problem. And so let's use plastic for what it all the benefits that it can give us. But let's move away from it as a disposable option, and recognize what's happening to those disposable choices that we're making, and that we can just simply make another choice. It's not inevitable. We sometimes run into this, like, what do I do? And, this, you shrug your shoulders and you're like, that's the way it is. And we want to make sure that it's perfectly, that everyone gets across that it doesn't have to be this way. What we didn't, this problem wasn't always here, and it doesn't always have to be with us. We can move on and tackle other problems, and that we can, just quickly move to reusable containers and permanent stainless steel straws and reusable bags. It's an easy switch, and we need to get rid of the disposable mentality. I'll leave it there.
Great. Thank you so much. I wanted to say that we are at the top of the hour, but we do not have to stop, although I just wanted to leave an opening for anyone who has to leave. We have a number of questions still in the queue, and I would love to give the floor to the creator of Open Litter Map, Sean in Ireland. And we also have, I see a couple new names, or at least specifically Aya Tagger. Aya, if you'd like to say anything and introduce yourself really quick, you'd be welcome to right now. Aya, are you there?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay, hear you. You're on.
That's perfect. Hi, thanks. I was invited by Emil to join this cool meeting, and I wanted to just to introduce this amazing makeathon, which I'm a part of, and it's called Geek on Green. And it will be happening at the end of April, right by DC. It's a sustainability technology makeathon. So we are really looking for anyone who's creative and wants to try and implement or create or make solutions that can be implemented hands-on for minimizing sea pollution, and of course, all the other sustainability areas which revolve around shelter, water, food, and communication, and energy, of course. And that will happen in Israel, in Caesarea, right by the sea.
And what are the dates on that?
It's going to be between the 26th and 28th of April, Thursday until Saturday, 3 days. We also have a Facebook event and, of course, a website. And you guys are all invited to join us. It's really exciting. It's the 5th time this makeathon is happening. It's all non-for-profit by volunteers. I'm just one of them. And Amir also, I think he participated all the previous times before. And we have people that come from multidisciplinary areas. It could be agriculture, it could be engineers, architects, designers like myself, educators, and it's really, really good for networking. There have been even several businesses that came out of this makeathon, following this makeathon, people who actually met the first time there and then launched a private business, which we of course encourage. It's awesome. So.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing that. And feel free to get in touch with the Public Lab community and other ways to let us know about it. And if you have any questions, you can just email me or use the chat in this video to just share your contact information with me, and we can follow up on email if you'd like to further promote this.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So we are going to continue the event, but anyone who has to drop off, it's okay. It's not rude. Everyone, no one will be offended if you have to go right now, because it has been an hour. So I want to, there's a number of questions on the board, but I also want to invite Sean, who's a special guest from Open Litter Map, to share a few things. I don't think we can hear you yet, Sean. Nope, not yet.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Okay, we're good. Hi. I had to reboot that. So we're good? You can hear me?
Yes.
Good. Hi, Liz. Hi, everyone. I just spotted this on Facebook earlier, so I thought I'd pop on and see what you guys are up to, which is pretty cool. But so my name's Sean Lynch. I'm the developer of Open Litter Map, which is a citizen science game, like what I call Pokemon Go for tidy towns. So tidy towns, I put these in the wrong ears. Tidy towns is a cleanup group here in Ireland, and I was a gamer in a previous life. So yeah, Pokemon Go for tidy towns is my quip for Open Litter Map. So with Open Litter Map, all of the data is manually processed, manually verified, and completely free and open for anyone to download. If I can share my screen here, actually, look at it. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the home page. And as well as all of the data, you can actually get paid for mapping litter with LitterCoin, which is the first blockchain reward for the production of geospatial data. So as an incentive and a reward for producing open data, you'll get a token on the Ethereum blockchain, which is nothing fancy. It's just a default copy-paste ERC20 implementation, but it's the first token for the production of data. And it doesn't really do anything yet. That's something that I'm working on. But my vision for LitterCoin is that I want to give people a monetary incentive to collect data. And my idea is that when there's a defined monetary incentive, it's probably going to take about an hour, and we're going to map all of the world's litter in an incredibly short space of time. And that financial incentive is going to produce the rapid production of geospatial data on a global scale that has never been seen before. So that's kind of what I'm working at. So to earn LitterCoin, you can submit 100 images in a row. And if you submit 100 images in a row, you get paid 1 LitterCoin. Alternatively, if you click here on maps and data, there's a global leaderboard. And then you can see that you get the list of each country. So if you're the first to upload from a location, well, you get that credit for creating that location in the database. So OpenLitterMap, basically, it reverse geocodes the GPS tag from photos, from geotag photos, and it goes to OpenStreetMap. It takes those values from OpenStreetMap, and then OpenLitterMap will populate itself dynamically based on those locations. And that process is also redeemable in LitterCoin. So you get 100 LitterCoin for creating a country. If you click into a country, you get 50 LitterCoin for each state. You click in again, you get 25 LitterCoin for each city. So that's LitterCoin. And with OpenLitterMap, all of the data is mapped categorically. And if there's a brands category as well, that gets populated as well. So that's also mapped by corporation. So there's a handful of our global corporation friends that are, their economic activity is resulting in, plastic pollution the world over. So we're also collecting data on those. There's a leaderboard at each location that you can compete in with either your name or your username. I suppose it's worth mentioning that when you first upload, by default, you're anonymous. And all data is also mapped by time. So these charts will just populate themselves dynamically. That's pretty handy. And most importantly, all of the data is completely free and open for anyone to download. You have to log in to get the button, but you can also just go through the URL to access the API. So if you don't want to create an account and you just want the data, you can just click this in and access all the data. If you want to actually so there's 2 maps. There's the global map at the top, which will just link to OpenLitterMap/global. But if you want to get the weighted hexagonal spatial grid, I'll show you a cool one here, which is in the Netherlands. So there's one user signed up last month and has absolutely dominated the OpenLitterMap scene. So all of this data is like one user who just killed it for the entire month. Yeah, you can see April now again. It's after dropping down, right? So as more people submit data, you'll see that value push up in near real time. But I think this is the city where one of my main users lives. So at each city location, because the browser won't generate these graphs or these maps based on extremely large boundaries, right? So you have to go to a smaller layer, like what I call a city layer. If I can just move that window over there. But if I just turn off a bunch of these layers, so all the litter is also mapped categorically or by behavior. One second there, my family are just going nuts. But yeah, you can turn on the brands category, and you can see that this is also mapped by corporation. So we've got all of our corporate friends here as well. And all of the data is manually verified. So like all of this data is scientifically accurate. So if you send me data, then I manually verify all of that data before releasing it as open data. So it's incredibly tedious, but the result is really high quality data. And I have my own admin section. So with a good internet connection, if the data is done properly on the user side, I can verify an image, about 1 a second. And I've manually verified 100% of all of the data that's being sent to me. So you can trust that the data is good quality. So that's that. So yeah, I've got a couple of Medium articles as well here. There's one here on LitterCoin, just introducing that. And if I can just go on to the left. I'm also recruiting ambassadors and interns. So if anyone wants to participate in the Open Litter Map ecosystem, I'm setting up a nonprofit, the Open Litter Map Foundation. I'm looking for national and sub-national ambassadors who can campaign locally to get, city council or schools or universities or cleanup groups involved. So these are currently going to be preliminary positions, but once the Open Litter Map Foundation is established, I'm going to hold an online AGM, and we're going to vote in those positions and board of directors and so on. That's something we could also do on the blockchain. We could let people vote on the blockchain, and that's something I'm looking at is the Open Litter Map DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, and just put it out there and just let it run autonomously and kind of see what happens. So yeah, if you'd like to sign up, you can submit as many images as you want for free, but Open Litter Map is completely dependent on crowdfunding. So there is a free account, but if you think the work I'm doing is worth, $5 a month, then you're welcome to support that. And once you log in, you'll be brought to the submit page. So you can click here or just drop your photos in, and that'll automates the mapping process. And you got to visit your profile, which is linked twice. It's at the top there, and it's also down the bottom. And yeah, you can see that I've mined a bunch of LitterCoin. This is image number 3,923 that I uploaded a bunch of months ago, but I'm getting lazy. You can also record the presence of litter. So if it's if litter's still there or hasn't been taken away, and then you can just add in or take away as many different types of litter as you want, and it's mapped like quantitatively as well, and you can just update this in the browser, and that collapses as well on mobile as well. So I just open up my DevTools and turn on mobile view. You can see that it collapses. So it's built mobile first. I don't have mobile apps yet. It currently just works as a web app in the browser. So you've got to go to openlittermap.com. But yeah, it works well. And if you're someone who cleans up as you go, you can, let me just turn that off again. You can also record the default value of the presence of the litter that you're mapping. So if you're someone who cleans as you go, you can change presence to false to say, well, that litter is being taken away. Or if you're leaving it there, you can record that default value as well. So you can change the default value, and you can change the setting per piece of litter or per geotag photo as well. And to claim your LitterCoin allowance, all you got to do is have a public Ethereum wallet ID, and just chuck that in there and give that to me in my database, and I'll issue you those LitterCoin manually. So that's because of my technical smart contract limitations. But yeah, keep an eye out for LitterCoin. And what I'm interested in is that rapid production of data. So it mightn't be the first go, it mightn't be the second go, but eventually we're going to see a situation where we can crowdsource a ton of data in like an hour, and all of it's free and open. So, what happens next is anybody's guess. So if you want to use that data for research or consultancy or training or advocacy or, whatever you want, be my guest. There's no point in me just hanging on to this data. I want you guys, I want everyone to have access to the data. So you can get all the data from anywhere in the world. You don't have to pay for it. You don't even have to log in. But if you want to create an account and create some data, that'd be great. I can give you my email there as well. It's info@openlittermap.com. So yeah, that's my quick presentation.
Great. That was such a gift, Sean. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any immediate clarifying questions for Sean? Especially perhaps Sky, since she's about to head out.
Well, Sean, I was wondering if you'd created an app or was considering an app for smartphones.
Yeah, that's in development. I'm a self-taught developer. I'm doing all this from scratch. This is my first website or first web app. So I actually built an app in Swift for iOS, and it did what I wanted it to do, except for authentication and logging in. So I had to kind of take a few steps back and sort that out. And now I just have my web app is in production. It launched just nearly 12 months ago, so it's coming up to its first birthday. But yeah, those are in development. I also have a bunch of other things in development, like machine learning to free up the manual processing. So that's why I'm manually verifying all of the litter in each image, so I can build machine learning algorithms just to try and free that up. So I think I'm going to do machine learning first, or launch that first, and then go back to the mobile apps. But what I found though is just people's technological expectations are just ridiculous. And I know that everyone would love an app, but like as a self-taught developer with no funding, I can only do so much. But yeah, it's in development, and the good thing is that I enjoy it. So the apps will happen eventually, but it's not a huge priority at the moment. There's still bug fixes and feature improvements and machine learning. And
I was thinking of something like, have you ever seen iNaturalist?
I have seen iNaturalist, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. If you could take a picture of the litter and then just put in where it is and everything, all the information, and it would immediately upload to your system,
That's a good idea, yeah, that could work.
I had a similar comment, not for iNaturalist, but for Literati. Do you know about Literati?
I do. I supported them during their Kickstarter.
Ah, gotcha. Have you talked with them? Because it seems like you guys might be complementary in what you're offering.
Yeah, a lot of people have suggested that, and that conversation hasn't happened yet. We've got different approaches, different methodologies, but all of my data is free and open. So if anyone, if Literati or anyone else wants to use all that data and integrate it into their platform, then they're welcome to do it. So yeah, that's a conversation that's waiting to happen, perhaps.
Okay.
Great.
I know Jeff, and he's been out in New York when he was doing the TED residency, and I had a chance to meet him, and he seems very open and willing to collaborate. So that might be something that could happen.
Yeah.
Have you considered reaching out to, if you're talking about machine learning, have you considered reaching out to either the instructors of Stanford CS231 or Kaggle, those kind of communities? Oftentimes people are searching for new data sets that they could be the first to use them for machine learning needs. Have you looked at that?
I haven't. I'm doing 100% of this independently, and partly because I want to become skilled in these technologies, right? But yeah, if there's people who are willing to help out and to give me a hand, then my door is open, so to speak.
Yeah, there are quite a few resources. I think that the Kaggle community is a great place to start. Depending on how large is your data set, you might even be able to get them to have like a competition on your data. But there are many, my experience is there are many resources and many people who are happy and eager to show that. And oftentimes you can use it just as a basis for studying that. I'm studying it right now myself, so that's why I'm recommending that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good advice. I have my first publication in press actually in open geospatial data software and standards, and I talk about just my future plans for using the data for the verified and open data for machine learning. So I'm hoping that's going to generate some interest, and hopefully I'll be able to make some new connections out of that.
Well, everyone, this is fantastic, and we actually have a lot of people continuing to be on the line, but we have had some had to go, but we're still 17 of us. And Rosie from Greenpeace's Action Tech Group, who's a very interesting group that we haven't connected with yet before, is volunteered to also share. So I'm wondering if Rosie, if you'd like to. Thank you, Sean. If you would, Rosie could maybe take the floor and share if you'd like to.
Hi. Yes. Thank you. I'm new at the Action Tech Group, so don't expect too much from my experience with it. I'm based in Madrid, and I was with the ship for the last 3 months as a radio operator. I'm starting the job. I just wanted to share actually, I would say, personal experience on the topic with plastic, and I have based on that, I have a question at the end. So I was born in Brazil, in Macapá, Amapá, which is in the equator. And when I was a little girl, it was very common to see garbage in plastic packs at the Amazon River and river. And not only that, washing machines and different type of garbage. And it was pretty common when I was a little girl. I'm 30 years old now, so and when I go back there, I still see this happening. And so this year I was doing a safety course to be able to work at sea, and the instructor was talking about that topic, and he gave an example. He said that it was very common for ships just throw away old equipment at sea because like that they don't have to pay the discharge somewhere else for those garbage. And he said he saw um, complete equipment of gym equipment being thrown at sea. And he said it was very common to do that and might be still very common to do that. And so the course was in the island, Canary Island, Gran Canaria. And he said also that it was very common for people in the island to just throw away all the material, washing machine, cars, even cars they would throw in the sea. So yeah, it's very scary because it looks like it's just easy to get rid of our garbage. And I also think about what happened in 2009 when we discovered, in Brazil, we were receiving big amounts of container coming from Europe, and it was full of electronic garbage, e-waste, that it was actually illegal. So with all of that, I wonder how is there a way to track all of those garbage so we can have I don't know how to make this clear, but basically to have the origin of the garbage, so so we can, I don't know, tax or make people responsible for that to pay for it, because it's a crazy idea to send an illegal container to a poor country to get rid of your e-waste. So I think they might also just dump it at sea. It's also an easy solution, and nobody knows the waste ever existed, and it just accumulates more waste. So from all the amount of waste we have on the oceans, is there a way, is there any study that has been done to try to find out where it mostly comes from, what the materials come from? I don't know. That's what I wanted to know.
Great. Would anyone like to respond to this frame? The idea that what kind of accountability do we have for the sources of especially plastic pollution in this case, when it's outside of like a nation's regulatory boundaries? How can we get back to like finding the original polluters, if I understood it correctly?
Yes.
kind of what I had written about earlier in the chat. I'm wondering if there isn't some way we could force manufacturers to have to put a marker in their plastics, so that at least we'd know which manufacturer it was coming from, and they would know who they sell their product to. You know, some way to like track back to see who's the biggest problems, and maybe who needs to have some kind of reins put on them, or some kind of regulatory management put on them if necessary.
I think it's a great idea. I haven't seen anything that can do that at this point. I would hate to see any type of electronic device be put into any of these things or anything. Maybe there's some
No, I'm
technology
thinking more of a
out
chemical marker. You know, like a chemical marker that would track.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. What has been really effective so far is when the photograph of the pollution includes the brand name. And there's kind of two people or two entities at fault. There's the manufacturer for producing a disposable item from a permanent material, and then there's also whoever it was that didn't put it in the recycling stream. So ideally, you could get both entities to change their behavior. One, not make so many disposable items and start looking for reusable solutions, but then also the entity that whoever it is that didn't put it in the recycling stream. So there's kind of two areas where I think the problem's being created. A chemical marker is an interesting idea. I mean, that's more chemicals into pollutive or disposable stuff. So, but yeah, I think in general, the idea of getting the polluters to pay is a good one. And if we can come up with a good way to do that, we should. Extended producer responsibility laws, the EPR laws.
And that, some countries are already doing that, where I think Germany is one of them, where if you produce a product and sell it there, you have to account for getting rid of it afterwards, recycling or collecting it in some way, and you're not allowed to just sell things and then forget about them.
Yep. And it has a dramatic impact right away on how they deal with their packaging waste.
Exactly. I think that would be the way to turn the sink off. If you say the manufacturer is responsible and they have to account and take care of their product when it's finished its use, I think they would be looking a lot more towards creating products that could easily be disposed of and not create a permanent problem,
Yep.
Now, can I jump in?
Yeah.
So now with Open Litter Map, or some of the other apps, or you can do it yourself. You don't need Open Litter Map to collect data, right? You can do this with QGIS if you want to, and I can share my dissertation. So that's where Open Litter Map came from. I wrote a dissertation in 2015 on an open litter mapping methodology with Q. So I can share that with you guys if you want to be able to generate your own open litter maps without any platform. And it's basically just joining tables. It takes a lot of manual processing, and I hope you think the open litter map or another experience is a bit more fun. And it also shares your data, right? But now with these apps, for example, with Open Litter Map, you can collect data on the brands of the pollution being caused by the economic activity of a handful of global corporations. And because all of that data is free and open, what happens next, as I said earlier, is anyone's guess. But for the first time, we can sort of include those global corporations and local franchises in the discussion about, why are your products ending up here? And ultimately, I think the vision will be that polluter pays, but it's going to take a bit of an effort to get to that stage. Governments, local authorities have advanced mapping capabilities, but they're not interested in mapping the litter caused by the economic activity of global corporations or local stakeholders or local businesses. Litter mapping is not good for business in government local authorities' eyes. I'd like to suggest a different conversation. I think it's incredibly good for business, those businesses that want to get involved, those businesses that are willing to say, well, we'll reward your, litter mapping, with a free coffee in exchange for a litter coin or a discount on our services. And it gives them improved market visibility and acceptance with, a growing zero waste movement and a growing disinterest in disposable plastic products. I think that's a consumer movement that's still in its infancy. And I think that the businesses who are on board can actually gain from it. We can include those corporations in the discussion, but it's going to take a while until we can enforce the polluter pays principle. But you're welcome to use any of the Open Litter Map data if you want to try and do that.
That sounds incredible. And Rosie, throwing it to you to mention what you just wrote in the chat.
Yes. Well, the question is, if you have to fight at the root of the problem, and the root is the production, why not try to enforce how companies to pay for taxes on the amount of plastic produced? So it would motivate them to produce less plastic.
I couldn't hear you too well, but I can read what you wrote in the chat. The idea of along what we were just talking about with increasing the consumer movement for corporate responsibility. Is there a way to begin adjusting taxes for corporations based on this? And
I'll jump real quick, just as an example. If you've seen Literati's TED Talk, he shares a story about how they were able to increase the tax on cigarettes just by tracking the amount of cigarettes that they had, and that's what kind of got his project going. Is that the city of San Francisco contacted him and said, "Can you help us in tracking the amount of cigarette pollution?" And just by using his crude, it was essentially an Instagram account, just by using the Instagram account to photograph, which already had all the geocoded data in it, they were able to increase the tax significantly. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. You can see it in his TED Talk, but there's a specific example of how the data directly led to a direct, I think it in fact doubled the tax that they were proposing. The cigarette companies tried to get rid of the tax and fought it, and instead, just by using the Literati platform, they were able to double the tax. So it can have a dramatic effect when used properly, this type of approach.
Wow. Fantastic. And so conversation on this, I'm going to wrap up as a facilitator. We have gone half over our time. This is really incredible. I just want to express gratitude for so much work is being poured into this issue around the world. These projects that were shared today and the research are really, really incredible. And we here at Public Lab, we will do our part to help all these projects connect to each other and set up a place to perhaps subscribe to marine plastic research and projects. So we're really looking forward to supporting all these projects and their great identities and their strong work regionally around the world. And that is about it for April's Open Hour. I see some chat. Yes, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Liz. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Great Open Hour.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll be on again the first Monday of next month. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Sean, Rosie, for jumping in with incredible sharing. And more soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.